My name is Tom King, and I'm the founder of Toolkit.law. We have the privilege of being here with an advocate of the Supreme Court of Pakistan, Syed Riaz Hussain. Syed, it's a pleasure to greet you from Islamabad, where I believe you're about 10 hours ahead of me. How are you doing?
Thank you for having me, Tom. I'm great. I'm very excited about having this discussion with you about human trafficking and how it affects children and adults, and the different uh, areas which are essential for any legal professional looking to educate themselves better about this particular problem that's uh, becoming a focus of uh, international law enforcement of
Absolutely.
academic.
Absolutely. Your title is Advocate of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. We appreciate you being here with us. We're going to jump straight into the help sheet for the next 30 minutes and cover this topic. As you should now see the help sheet on your screen, I'm sure you do. So, when we look at the topic of human trafficking between women, involving women and adults. I see at the top of the columns, we've divided it into adult human trafficking statistics, children human trafficking statistics, adult human trafficking resources, and children human trafficking resources. Let's focus on the left column first. What do you think is important for us as legal professionals in those 80 countries with English-based legal systems that Toolkit.law focuses on? What is it you want to lead us down on this green column on the left?
Right. So anyone interested in understanding how human trafficking uh, affects it develops as a problem for law enforcement uh, or for academic interests worldwide, the most essential thing would be the primary starting point would be to understand who the victims of such trafficking are. That's a good thing to begin any advanced understanding on the area. And according to what we have here, the International Labour Organization statistics indicate that close to 25 million adults are affected by human trafficking worldwide. Now, this would probably mean that 25 million people are directly affected by it, but uh, the effect otherwise on the families and people connected to these people, 25 million who are trafficked could be, uh, you know, incredibly large. Now, as it sets out here, that this statistic includes both labor exploitation and sexual exploitation. As we see further below, this will be divided into other industries in which trafficked individuals are, trafficked into. Uh, they are for adults. The areas where they are trafficked into include agriculture. One would imagine from third world countries to first world countries as sources of cheap labor. So it's not hard to imagine where they're headed for exploitation in the agriculture sectors, for example, and for workers in factories, in the construction industry. There's an incredible amount of new world developments taking place requiring cheap labor, and there's abundance of that in third world countries that we will focus on more clearly going forward. Domestic work is also one of the areas. It's also one of the areas where we see the most exploitation in, which is widely reported, because those cases could indicate or are often seen in high-profile cases of exploitation that are widely reported in the Western capitals, even in the Middle East, for example. There's often incredible reporting on the exploitation of trafficked workers. And going forward, one of the biggest areas, one of the most concerning would be the exploitation and the trafficking of adult humans for the sex trade. Very unfortunate, but it's one of the areas in which they are most trafficked into. Now, as one would imagine, the physical and psychological effects of this trafficking is tremendous and lasting, and presents in itself a host of other issues uh, involving those people. Now, next we look into the countries from where most of the trafficking originates.
I
Now,
know. I see on your help sheet you list India, Mexico, Thailand, Ukraine, and Nigeria.
that is correct. That's right, and this is not exhaustive. As I could quickly jump to the corresponding column regarding regions with the highest rates for child trafficking, one would see a confluence between adult and child trafficking uh, geography, and it would indicate that the cross section of countries cited as top countries of origin for adult trafficking are, uh, there's a certain identification for those as third world or economically challenged or affected by some uh, you know war or some civil breakdown that uh, leads people to look for opportunities of economic employment outside of their own countries. So this list is certainly not exhaustive, but it indicates a trend towards which one can look into to understand where the majority of the trafficking in the recent past is taking place. Now, the reasons set out here include economic instability, as set out in the worksheet, conflict and political corruption in these regions make individuals vulnerable to traffickers. One of the other things I've also been able to identify is large populations of economically disadvantaged people is also one of the primary drivers of trafficking in adult humans. So that's also something which is indicated. Uh, Trafficking, we know, is linked to migration patterns, where victims are promised better jobs but end up exploited in other countries. Now you have
which
to
is
understand.
which is certainly something that America has struggled with for the last 4 years of the previous administration. With all, I think we had approximately 20 million illegal aliens brought into the country, and probably over a million children lost in the system because of it. Horrible.
That's a staggering statistic you were setting out there. One of the issues with trafficking is that there is a set of people in the countries or in the regions that we've cited, and they are in a particular demographic of of an age of an economic background, and they are looking for an opportunity at life. And once they are promised that, they are you have a victim right there. Now the exploitation part then follows, and we'll be looking at the most vulnerable section of people uh, in that demographic uh, with respect to age. Now, in the worksheet, you'll see, and this is all statistically backed, that in the for adult trafficking, for the reasons that we've indicated, the age breakdown is between 8 to 24 years of age is particularly uh, set as vulnerable. And this accounts for around 40% of the adult victims. Now, this obviously also includes young individuals, but the majority of the 40% would constitute from this age bracket. Now, these are young adults trafficked under the false promises of employment opportunities. In the in the slightly middle-aged bracket of 25 to 40 years, this represents a 45% of the total uh, trafficked population, and they are forced into forced labor or sexual exploitation in countries with high demand for cheap labor, or countries indicated as you know tourist destinations for sex tourism. And then for the older bracket, which constitutes a slightly lesser percentage of traffic victims, these are forced into exploitation due to financial hardships or lacking family support. One of the other things which I ought to have also mentioned is trafficking for organ donation, which is a problem seen more particularly from where I am from, and from one of the one of the countries where trafficking for organ donation is a growing concern. It's something that's
Yeah, we
is
don't discuss that much in America. When we see news topics, Syed, I actually never think of that topic. I've certainly seen it in movie presentations, right? But is
a,
that
a
a
huge
big part of
problem.
what's going on in other parts of the world?
I can tell you for India as well as for Pakistan as well as for some other countries in the South Asian region, it's a huge problem, uh, and the issue is more significant if you consider that the demand for human organs is one that cannot be supplied for in any other way than by sourcing a human organ. And that forces a lot of people coming from impoverished backgrounds to compromise on their health and safety by donating an organ with which their quality of life either completely drops or is certain to drop going forward. Naturally, you can imagine by the donation of a limb within themselves, it's a huge problem that is law enforcement concern here, which we see uh, in Pakistan, for which there is legislation and there is uh, police guidelines to deal with
We
in
have about
certain.
we have about 1 minute left to finish the green column on these last three boxes. What do you want to hit on, Syed?
uh, Cross-border trafficking. Uh, the the percentage for adult trafficking, 40% of adult trafficking cases involve transnational movement, where victims are trafficked from one country to another often across borders with weak immigration controls or laws that traffickers exploit. This makes it very hard to track and apprehend traffickers and protect victims. One of the things we see in reality is that there has to be poor cross-border management across regions that enables traffickers to get uh, people from one country in an area across several countries prior to getting them to their country of destination, so to speak, from their country of origin. So it's a problem that's exploited by organized crime as well, which would explain how someone in Afghanistan or India or Pakistan can get across from their country over into Iran and then into Turkey, and then from Turkey into mainland Europe, or from one of those areas to the Horn of Africa, and then into Italy to get into Europe. So so that's the trafficking routes, which is very popular, and it indicates a severe lack of border management across regions rather than across one or two countries.
Well, we were talking about the adult side of the first page of your help sheet. Let's look at the second column regarding children. It's going to be even more heartbreaking. Go ahead.
It's certainly a more serious concern because of the fact that the choice of victims in being voluntary participants in this unlawful activity is almost certainly zero in cases of children. The numbers are staggering, they're very worrisome. As you can see in the top right column, each year, uh, around 1.2 million children fall victim to trafficking, with many trafficked for sexual exploitation, unfortunately, forced labor, or illegal adoption. Child trafficking has become a global crisis, and thankfully it has generated the kind of interest with the first world that it ought to have developed many years ago. It's a problem which is driven by factors such as poverty, very rampant across great regions of the world with large population. There's tremendous poverty in South Asia, for example, conflict, in countries in Eastern Europe, for example. It has subsisted for many decades now. More recently, for example, in Ukraine, in regions of Africa, which are perennially affected by conflict or strife, uh, the number of children trafficked is pretty significant, and the
So
lack of education.
what are the regions where we should be looking for this activity?
Uh, well, the worksheet identifies the factors which drive illegal child trafficking, and they would correspond with Southeast Asia, Central and West Africa, Latin America again. These are regions which demonstrably have the highest number of child trafficking victims. And the reasons identified are like I mentioned above, economic hardships and continuing conflicts and weak law enforcement. These make children particularly vulnerable. Now, refugee camps and disaster-stricken areas also see an increase in trafficking cases due to the instability and displacement of children. We see that for a fact in Pakistan, which houses large Afghan refugee and transit camps, has done so for many years, and that has uh, seen a corresponding increase in the numbers of children trafficked from those originating from those refugee camps. So, it makes the problem even more worrisome because those are children from one country who are housed in another country as refugees and then trafficked on to third countries. So, it's a problem which permeates regions rather than countries individually. And what puts children at particular risks, uh, leading to the problem developing, you know, uh, more significantly. As mentioned, these are almost always children from impoverished backgrounds with poor economic, educational, or social uh, chances at life or a better life. And these factors include children which are orphaned, for example, as a result of what we've stated, separated from their family, or living in communities with high rates of violence and crime. So you put all of this together and you have a clear likelihood that children from these areas are more likely to be affected uh, by or being susceptible to illegal trafficking because they're just victims waiting for the unlawful trafficking to occur. They're just there. I mean, they're cannon fodder. They are the raw material, so to speak, for that gruesome activity to take place. This really sets them out as the perfect candidates for unlawful trafficking.
In one of the other sessions that we recorded for this continuing legal education webinar, Syed, another expert in this topic summarized human trafficking as the profiting off human suffering. And I thought that impacted me so much when they said that the pure evilness of this, but we really do need to know the statistics behind it. And even today, I'm learning new statistics that I didn't even know before. Um, let's go ahead and continue down the help sheet.
So once again, once we see the gender and age breakdown for children victims of trafficking, you will notice that girls account for 70% of child trafficking victims. It's really heartbreaking, as you mentioned, because they are trafficked for sexual exploitation and they're lured with promises for jobs or educational opportunities. And once again, once you have um, a set of victim which corresponds to the demographics we have identified above, and the other factors with which they may be affected, you really have a victim ready for the unlawful offense to occur, and that's a problem, Tom, which is not unique to the third world. Um, Allow me to mention that most of the victims, for example, that we saw in the case of Jeffrey Epstein's, sexual ring were also from a very similar uh, underprivileged background that they would actively hunt out and
Oh,
make part of their unlawful trafficking network. Now, that's happening in one of the most developed countries in the world. Now, you bring that equation into a lawless third world country, which is extremely impoverished and where people would, you know, readily part with their children uh, in the hopes that they are being taken to a better economic situation or taken to a better chance at life or education. You really have a problem open up on a scale completely unimaginable. So that's the demographic for the large majority of child victims. And the other percentage, 30% are boys that are trafficked into uh, labor, cheap labor for agriculture, mining. Some of the areas which operate mines really uh, account for a lot of the young kids sent in, trafficked into those mining operations. And the other important demographic for that respect is that 10 to 17 years is the age bracket where children are most likely to be exploited for labor or sexual purpose. And even children younger than 10 years old are at risk of being trafficked for illegal adoption or as domestic workers. That's again something which is rampant uh, across the Middle East. Children trafficked for domestic workers or illegal adoption, very common. One of the other things which might have missed mention here is the practice of trafficking young boys to be employed as camel jockeys in the Middle East. Now, there are
oh,
significant.
okay. I did not see that coming. I did not see that topic coming, but
Would you like me to just have a quick
please.
discussion on
I,
that?
I think I think because we appealed at, we're part of our client, our customers are from the 80 countries with English-based legal systems. And when we can hear something of I mean, we don't see camels in America. I know when I was in Pakistan, I told you a month ago, there was a camel walking down the freeway. You don't see that in America. And but it's not a joking matter with what you're now sharing now. Please tell me.
Right, Tom. So one of the things which became a real problem with customs, with child protection bureaus in Pakistan was the propensity for trafficking gangs to traffic young boys into various countries of the Middle East to be used in local camel races as camel jockeys. Now, it's very hard for a person of of this region to find valuable work as a worker in the Middle East. Now, there's a great movement of people for all sorts of economic opportunities, but that was one which was particularly exploited uh,
Wow.
until very recently because there's a demand for child jockeys. Uh, the adult jockeys would find work as riding boys at horse stables and elsewhere. But camel racing is very popular in the rural Middle East, in cities and villages you don't hear about, not the swanky, capitals of the Gulf. So they would require young boys to be brought in with promise, like we've mentioned, of economic improvement in their lives. But that became such a widespread concern because of the effects it had on those young boys, the possibility of uh, serious injury or death, that it was outlawed. But the matter continued. It still does, but there's a great focus on ensuring that young children are not allowed free access into those Middle Eastern countries without adult supervision or without any reasonable excuse to be there because they're very often the victims of trafficking for the
Can we
Beg your
can we
pardon.
take can we take about one last minute to finish this column on the right?
Right. So there's a profile in which you can bracket the traffickers, and they operate in networks. It's an organized activity. It requires it as any organized criminal activity, a network which lures children with false promises of jobs. They could use advertising opportunities for better education or a better life. In some cases, they may even profit from young members of their own family or close acquaintances who sell children for financial gain. And others often pose as employees or agents offering legitimate opportunities. But it's only once a victim has been trafficked with very little to go back to, having paid a premium to get a hold of that opportunity, that they realize the life they're looking at, with very little possibility of successfully getting back to where they come from, because then it has the offense has occurred, and the traffickers have gained an interest, and they're very uh, deeply ingrained to allow a return to normalcy for any victim of trafficking. That's the whole problem.
Let's go
And
ahead and switch to the second page of the help sheet. So here we're talking about human trafficking resources regarding adults. Syed, what can you teach us about this?
this resource is the set of resources is incredible, because uh, many of these are one-stop solutions for education, for information, for data, or for reporting uh, incidents of adult or child human trafficking. The first we're looking at is the National Human Trafficking Hotline. It's a reporting and referral tool. It's a confidential online form to report suspected adult trafficking and to receive immediate referral to local services. It's very interactive, and anyone who's in a situation where they wish to get across to uh, you know uh, uh, an independent, a verifiable, comfortable way of reporting an incident of human trafficking, this is the go-to. Certainly worth looking into if that's an area of interest for any legal professional. Then the
I've
next
certainly,
area.
yeah, go ahead. I've certainly been on the Polaris website.
Oh yes, certainly. It's a research and intelligence tool for free downloadable guides about data regarding human trafficking. Very very important, how it happens and how it can be used to hold traffickers accountable. Many of the resources, Tom, you've mentioned here were also mentioned in a international migration organization tool that we had close to our office here in Pakistan. So I'm somewhat familiar with them from before also. The third one is a global modern slavery directory. Yeah, yeah, you're looking at it here. So it is managed by Polaris, like that indicated. It's a location-based resource map to search for shelters, clinics, counseling, and legal aid for adult traffickers, trafficking survivors globally. Very interactive. All of these, including the next one, the United Nations Office of Drug Control Toolkit to combat trafficking in persons. Very important, and it will also introduce you to another area of very significant concern involving human trafficking, and that is its confluence with, or its use in illegal drug trade. So very important for any legal practitioner to have it, any legal practitioner in this subject area, to have it as their tool, uh, for information on legal professionals, for international organization and social workers addressing adult trafficking. Tom, the next resource, which is the Human Trafficking Legal Center. Very important again. I could be using it here if I were, it's something which transcends national, yes, yes, this one, which transcends national legal systems because anyone looking for a proper academic resource for this subject area has to have this as one of the go-to resources for legal training, for sample pleadings, litigation checklists, and survivor-centered law guides. So very essential, all of this. The next resource we have is the National Survivor Network. It's a peer advocacy toolkit, and it's created by and for survivors. So there's personalized input from victim and the intended audience being people who are affected by this issue. And this includes self-advocacy material, leadership development guides, and trauma-informed healing practices. So, again, a significant toolkit for someone specializing in the human trafficking area as a legal practice. The next one is the Office for Victims of Crime, the OVC Victim Assistance Toolkits. Very essential again. I've looked at these. I've reviewed some of the toolkits on offer here. Amazing federal toolkits offering intake forms, confidentiality templates, service planning tools, multilingual resources for assisting adult victims. All of these resources are intended to make a very holistic program for anyone interested in continuing legal education in this human trafficking of adult human victims. And the next is in fact very interesting. Just looking at it, the Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking. Now, you get printable cards in multiple languages explaining the rights of trafficking survivors, their protection under law, and how to access those legal services. So it's really a very interactive, way of, and would probably take you back to your school days when printable cards were a go-to resource. So that sort of thing, in active legal services is what you get here at the castla.org website. And the next tool is a medical guidance for providers working with adult trafficking survivors, including trauma-informed care checklist and medico-legal protocols. That is the Heal Trafficking Healthcare toolkit. Very essential once again. So the resources you have here are top-notch. I think they really fit the description for anyone looking for anything whatsoever. And similarly, to the bottom right of the toolkit for resources for child trafficking victims, again, very essential. Once we get to the screen with it, I can maybe quickly refer to each one of those.
No, I'll put it back on the screen, but the one thing I was thinking about is many of the Toolkit.law users will come from corporate law firms around the world. And one of the things that one of our other sessions that we recorded 2 weeks ago really brought to mind is, you may be in a legal department or a human resources department, and you need to know what to look for human trafficking. You may not even know if you're an energy company or you mentioned a mining company. They may be using human trafficking labor rather than voluntary local labor, right? And even from a corporate perspective or a very removed, civil law perspective or employment law perspective, we all have the opportunity, and we really need to be human trafficking, trauma informed lawyers to look for these things to be a part of the solution. And of course, that was one of the main motivations for adding these 3 hours to our continuing legal education.
I think it should be mandatory for anyone in the human resources department of most large organizations to have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And particularly when their workforce includes people coming in from some of the conflict areas that we've mentioned. They may be doing a perfectly all right job for them, but it has to be seen that they are not victims in any way either victims or contributing to child trafficking. So it's basic knowledge anyone must necessarily have if they have a human resources background in any large organization. As we've said at about these victims
And,
are
and
trafficked.
if you're a corporation and you're not doing that, how could you not make that a priority to voluntarily train your people on that? If nothing else, than to limit, if you need this motivation for legal exposure limiting.
Oh, certainly. You see, like I said, the victims of human trafficking, for all the reasons that we've mentioned about, for economic exploitation, for cheap labor, for use in mining industry, they are trafficked somewhere to the benefit of somebody. So there's the other part of the operation, which is benefiting from the whole thing, other than traffickers, and those are people that are profiting from the labor of these trafficked victims, and those may be economic exploitation. Those may be through economic exploitation as well as through other different methods of how these victims are exploited, including sexual exploitation. So it's not simply a concern for individuals in large corporations to see that their workforce is clean from any such concern, but also for governments in tourist destinations across Southeast Asia, for example, to
Let's
be
go ahead and
sensitive.
take yes, let's go ahead and take the last 5 to 7 minutes. Let's focus on the right column that you have on page
The
2 of
child,
your help sheet.
right, the child trafficking uh, resources column. Now, the first and the most basic resource one must have at the tip of their fingers is the official U.S. platform to report online child trafficking, exploitation, or grooming. Very essential. That's the report.cybertip.org. It's an incredibly interactive, very simple resource to use, and for anyone in North America, in the United States, confronted with a situation such as this, once you get onto such a resource, these are enabled to help you uh, access the right information, even if you're unacquainted with how to report things or how to access things, because they are designed by professionals, intended to benefit anyone who's taken the trouble of getting across to them. And the next resource is the ECPAT school-based prevention curriculum for youth and educators. These are downloadable modules for middle and high school students to recognize, resist, and report child trafficking. Again, you could be looking at areas of concern and make sure that this is made a part of the curriculum, because these are downloadable modules. They could be made part of curriculum.
Oh,
Children could be voluntarily be asked if they're interested in scoring, taking this up as some credit hours in school, for example, or just generally in areas of concern.
what a great middle school addition to an education for children, children ages 10 to 15, 10 to 14, to be introduced to this horror.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have programs in school teaching young children about what is proper, physical conduct, then going forward in areas of concern of sensitive demographics for child exploitation, this could certainly be a part of the curriculum. I think the resource is there, and not employing it is really careless on the part of anyone who recognizes it and still doesn't benefit from it. And you see, the next resource is the Love 146. Not a curriculum number, it's a trafficking prevention for teenagers. We've seen the greatest percentage of victims of child trafficking are in that teenage bracket. Very interactive program for young kids that builds resilience and trafficking awareness. Again, I would rate it as a primary resource which should be made part of any sensitization program for young adults. I mean, these are things which young adults are confronted with. I mentioned in the most developed countries in the world, going uh, forward to the impoverished or the not so economically great countries. So the resources there, like I said, and not employing it is really careless on the part of policymakers. So the next resource is it's called Youth Care, and it's Traffic Minor Safe Housing Program. Again, very essential. It provides emergency shelter and long-term housing to trafficked youth ages 12 to 24, along with therapeutic and education services. Now, this, along with the next one, the Child Welfare Information Gateway, Human Trafficking section, are very essential tools for people who are in action, so to speak, not just for the academic interests in this area, but essentially for leading people to take action and for people who are part of the response program to child trafficking to develop, a best skill set to address these issues. Uh, the next one is a Shared Hope International Juvenile Justice and Advocacy Toolkit. Very essential once again. It provides detailed training for attorneys and advocates to support child trafficking survivors during court proceedings and to avoid recriminalization. You know, there couldn't be a more significant social issue involving victims of child trafficking than to provide them the necessary support once they have found some law enforcement to back them and to prevent them from getting once again into that vicious cycle which they have been rescued out of. So this is a toolkit for anyone who specifically specializes in providing legal aid to victims of child trafficking.
Syed, we have about 3 minutes left to finish this column.
Right. So the next resource is Safe Bay, the school-based prevention campaign, student-led initiative providing free toolkits to prevent sex trafficking and exploitation in middle and high schools. I think this could be extremely useful for sets of people with interest in the area to be introduced to this toolkit, so they develop a sensitization to it and are part of a youth-driven effort to educate as many people within that age bracket to the issues of child trafficking. And lastly, the National Center for Youth Law is a resource for legal support for trafficked minors. Very essential once again, very interactive. It provides advocacy and direct representation for minors in foster care or juvenile justice systems who have experienced, trafficking in one way or the other. So these resources are all incredibly focused. They are, very interactive, and they cater to a range of areas one would be confronted with in any program, in any action, in any reporting on child and adult human trafficking.
When you look back on your legal career, if there was something that you know today that you wish you knew when you were starting law regarding this area, regarding this evil covering our planet, what do you think you were aware of when you started as an attorney or a lawyer or a barrister, depending on the term in your country? When you started as a legal professional, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I think this resource that we've just gone over is incredibly interactive. This should cut down the work required to research, to get the requisite data, to
Yep.
be better equipped to address a situation, whether in a courtroom or whether in law enforcement or whether as part of a social reporting group. Uh, it's really all out there. Anyone who claims to have any interest or is required to be a part of the effort to address child or adult human trafficking has something for them in the resource that we've just gone over. It's right there. It's all set out. It's the work of incredible people who've taken their time and expertise out and put it out all together in one place. They really should be looking at this if they're serious about uh, anything to do with child and adult human trafficking.
And I started out as a criminal prosecutor in my country where I practice. You know, 30 years ago, we never talked about this topic in my country. Even as law enforcement, right, as criminal prosecutors. And yet this has been going on for millennia. Millennia. No matter which religious script you read, we see over the last 3,000 years of slavery, and they've just gotten smarter on how to do it.
Um, yes, certainly. There's been economic migration going on. Migration is in a sense, human movement across continents, across countries, whichever description they were attached to it in the centuries and millennia gone by. And this is an evil aspect of it, which differentiates between lawful access to economic opportunity and exploitation of those that are vulnerable. So it really divides the thing right at the center. There's perfectly lawful methods of getting across for economic benefit, but that has their own set of rules which are now in place, very rigorous regimes across countries. And then there is this problem that we've just gone over. And like you said, at the time when you might have started practicing as a prosecutor, even now for the uninitiated, if there weren't such toolkits around, getting across to that wealth of information that's contained there in those resources, in the crystallized information that we have in those squares that we've just reviewed. That's a gold mine of information. Anyone who's serious enough has to have this as a preliminary point to start with.
We've been speaking with Syed Riaz Hussain, advocate of the Supreme Court of Pakistan. Sir, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for your help, and shukriya, as I believe you say.
Thank you.
Shukriya.
Yes.
Thank you for this help on this topic of human trafficking regarding children and human trafficking.
Thank you, Tom.